The courtroom was silent, until one woman walked in. Michael Jordan looked up, and in that split second, the greatest competitor in sports history completely froze. No words. No anger. Just a reaction so unexpected that even the judge stopped the hearing. What did he see in her eyes that shook him after all these years? Stay with me, because what happened next changed how everyone saw Michael Jordan forever. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an update. Now, let's dive into what really happened. The courtroom was unusually silent, the kind of silence that feels heavy and expectant. Every seat was filled, yet no one dared to speak above a whisper. Reporters lined the back rows, holding notebooks and cameras, ready to capture even the smallest reaction. The soft echo of footsteps and distant murmurs bounced off the walls, creating a tense atmosphere. This was meant to be a routine legal proceeding, nothing more than a formal appearance connected to a chapter of Michael Jordan's personal life that most believed had long been closed. No one came expecting emotion. No one came expecting drama. For everyone present, this was just paperwork, legal clarity, and procedure. Then the doors opened. The sound was subtle, but it immediately drew attention. Michael Jordan's ex-wife walked into the courtroom, and in that instant, the entire mood shifted. She didn't rush, and she didn't hesitate. Her steps were calm and steady, her posture confident. She was dressed with quiet elegance, not seeking attention yet commanding it effortlessly. There was no sign of nervousness on her face, only composure. The room reacted instantly. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Pens froze in mid-air. A few reporters slowly raised their cameras, sensing something unexpected. Even the judge briefly looked up, acknowledging the change in the room without saying a word. Michael Jordan, seated at the front with his legal team, hadn't noticed her arrival yet. His focus remained forward, calm and controlled, as it always was. But when he finally turned his head and saw her standing there, everything shifted. His expression changed in a way few had ever witnessed. The confident stillness softened. For a brief moment, the legendary competitor looked deeply human. It wasn't anger or surprise alone, it was recognition. The past, thought to be distant and settled, had suddenly walked back into the present. And in that quiet courtroom, before a single word was spoken, everyone knew this was no longer just a routine day. For a man who spent his entire career dominating opponents under the brightest lights, in the most pressure-filled arenas, this moment was entirely different. It wasn't a game. It wasn't a media interview. It wasn't a contract negotiation or a business meeting. This was personal. Witnesses later described the scene with awe. Michael Jordan's face went pale, his usually confident expression shifting almost imperceptibly but noticeably. His jaw tightened, a subtle sign of tension, while his famously composed posture softened, betraying the inner storm he was experiencing. For a brief, fleeting moment, the legendary athlete appeared like any ordinary man confronting a past he thought had been long buried. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He simply watched. His eyes followed her every step as she walked gracefully across the room and took her seat. Observers said his hands clenched briefly, perhaps unconsciously, while others noticed a slow exhale, as if he were bracing himself for an emotional storm he hadn't anticipated. The air around him seemed to thicken with unspoken tension. This wasn't anger. It wasn't resentment. There was no bitterness. It was something deeper, something unresolved. A chapter of his life that had been closed on paper but never fully reconciled in his heart had suddenly resurfaced. People close to Jordan later admitted that even he had not expected to see her there in person. He had prepared for lawyers, documents, and phone calls, all formal and controlled. But face to face, after all these years, it was entirely different. The calm, confident exterior that had defined him for decades could not fully mask the flood of memories, emotions, and reflections triggered by this unexpected encounter. In that courtroom, even the greatest competitor of all time was reminded that some moments, some people, and some emotions cannot be outrun. No matter how legendary you are, Michael Jordan's marriage, in its prime, had often been portrayed as unbreakable, just like his legendary career on the basketball court. Publicly, there were smiles, appearances at events, and images of a seemingly perfect life. Privately, however, The story was far more complex. Behind closed doors, fame, pressure, and the constant demands of a life lived in the public eye slowly created cracks that few could see. What looked perfect to the outside world was, in truth, a delicate balance that became increasingly difficult to maintain. When their marriage ended, it was both expensive and highly publicized. The world watched closely as two people who had once shared so much went their separate ways. The split was not only painful emotionally but also complicated legally. For many, it seemed like the end of a chapter. Afterward, both moved on, or at least that's what the public believed. Michael Jordan immersed himself in business, focused on building his legacy, and kept his personal life private, avoiding headlines that might bring unwanted attention. His ex-wife chose a quieter path, stepping back from the spotlight, rarely speaking about the past, and carefully maintaining her privacy. But history has a way of resurfacing when least expected. The court appearance that brought them together decades later wasn't fueled by revenge, greed, or any desire for public spectacle. It revolved around unfinished business, long-standing agreements and interpretations that required clarification. Legal necessity had brought them face to face, yet the encounter carried far more weight than either paperwork or procedure could have anticipated. Even after years apart, the past does not remain silent. Lives once deeply intertwined carry echoes that can surface unexpectedly. In that courtroom, it became clear that time had not erased the emotional impact of their shared history. When two people who once mattered so deeply collide again, even the strongest walls can crack, and the emotions thought long buried rise to the surface, demanding recognition. Then came the moment no one could have predicted. The courtroom had been tense, every person silently watching, waiting for what might unfold. The judge called for a short recess, giving everyone a brief pause. Michael Jordan, who had been seated quietly, stood up. All eyes instinctively turned toward him, expecting him to follow his legal team out of the room, as was customary. But instead, he paused. A hush fell over the courtroom, and the air seemed to thicken with anticipation. Slowly, deliberately, he turned his gaze toward his ex-wife. The room collectively held its breath. It was a small movement, yet one loaded with meaning. He nodded, not a forced nod, not a perfunctory gesture made out of obligation. This was a genuine acknowledgement, filled with respect and understanding. It carried a weight that words could never capture. His ex-wife looked up in response, meeting his eyes with the same calm, quiet composure. She returned the nod, equally sincere. No words were exchanged between them. No forced smiles, no tears, no dramatics. Yet the moment resonated far more powerfully than any verbal exchange could. It spoke of closure, respect, and a shared understanding that went beyond legalities. Reporters present later described it as the loudest silence they had ever witnessed. In those few seconds, years of memories, love, conflict, shared struggles, and personal growth passed between them. It was a brief yet profound exchange that reminded everyone watching that human emotion cannot always be measured in words or gestures. This was the reaction that truly shocked everyone. It wasn't anger. It wasn't pride. It wasn't ego. It was maturity. It was a reminder that even the greatest figures in history, the most legendary competitors, carry human experiences that demand empathy and understanding. In that quiet nod, the world saw not just a legend, but a man acknowledging his past with dignity. After the hearing concluded, Michael Jordan left the courthouse quietly. There were no interviews, no public statements, and no comments for the cameras. He didn't feel the need to explain or justify anything. But according to people close to him, the encounter stayed with him long after he walked out of that building. It wasn't something fleeting, it lingered in his thoughts, a reminder that some experiences are more than just moments in time. This wasn't about winning or losing a legal battle. It wasn't about proving a point or defending a reputation. It was about closure, a deeply personal acknowledgement of a chapter in life that had remained unresolved for years. Seeing his ex-wife face to face reminded him that even legends carry emotional weight. Even icons, whose lives are measured in championships and accolades, have moments and relationships that leave a lasting impact beyond trophies, money, and fame. For fans, this moment offered a rare glimpse into the humanity of Michael Jordan. It wasn't the competitor on the court, nor the billionaire businessman, nor the global icon who had inspired millions. It was the man himself, reflective, emotional, and quietly vulnerable. That is perhaps why this story resonated so strongly with people. It reminded everyone that behind greatness lies vulnerability. Behind success lies sacrifice. And behind every controlled, strong reaction is often a story that was never truly resolved. In that courtroom, Michael Jordan didn't speak a single word, but his reaction said everything. A simple nod, a brief acknowledgement, a silent exchange. They conveyed respect, maturity, and a sense of closure far more powerfully than any public statement could. If you found this story compelling and want more emotional, behind-the-scenes moments from the lives of legendary figures, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because sometimes, the most profound stories are the ones that never make the headlines but reveal the humanity behind the legend.